Hi, I'm Tim from Marathon Mates. On this episode, we'll be talking about the things we've learnt from our best runs. We'll talk about what went right and why. Conversely, there's just as much, if not more, to learn from those runs which didn't go quite to plan. We'll be sharing our lessons learnt so that you may not need to learn on the run. Are you ready to go?
Welcome
Let's
to
go.
the thrilling world of the Flying RuNR, brought to you by the Marathon Mates.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode number 58 of the Flying RuNR podcast. This episode is going to be a fun one. We'll be sharing our lessons learnt from out on the run. We'll share the things we've learnt from those rare but very exhilarating perfect runs, as well as those improvement opportunities from the runs which didn't go quite to plan. Tonight, we're going to get personal, telling you how it is. But before we do all of that, let me welcome my co-hosts to tonight's episode. I've got Tony, Tara, and Lucia. And Tara's just come fresh off the plane from a quick trip to the long, white, and very cold cloud over in New Zealand. What have you all been doing over the last week or so, guys?
Well, we just found out that Tara's really tired, Tim. So
Yes, I just found that out.
Look, I've just got off a plane, went to work, and now I'm doing a podcast. So yeah, I'm sort of a bit all over the place.
So I think we let Tara go first. What have you been up to this week, Tara?
Well, I've obviously been in New Zealand, as Tim said, visiting family. I also managed to wrangle both of my brothers, who have never done a park run before in their lives, to this is the most difficult park run name to ever say. I think it's even harder than any of the Japanese ones. It is called Otago Central Rail Trail Park Run, Alexandra. So that's where I was. Alexandra Park Run. Yes, so that's where I was. That was their 13th run, and it was -6 degrees. So managed to drag both brothers out. One of the brothers ran the whole way with me. We did it in 32 and a half minutes, and the other one walked it in about 50 minutes, I think it was. So yeah, they enjoyed it.
In a singlet too. He walked it with a singlet on.
-6.
-6. It was a bit fresh. I didn't feel my nose for the first 2.5 kilometers. So
did it make you feel like returning home for good there, Tara? Like -6?
Oh, look, it's nice and fresh. I do enjoy the weather here in Queensland, but the scenery is beautiful where I grew up in Central Otago. So yeah, it's hard to compare.
They say you can take the Kiwi out of the Kiwi girl, but you just can't. You can't ever take us. What do I say? You can take the Kiwi girl out of the country, but you can't take the Kiwi out of the Kiwi girl. There will always be a Kiwi girl.
I hope everyone made sense of that. So
I didn't, but I'm pretty tired. So
blame it on my jet lag from picking Tara up from the airport last night. What about you, Tony?
I went off for a 15K run on Saturday. Sharon went off for a 12K walk, and at about the 6K mark, I think my calf was sort of saying, "What are you doing? Because we shouldn't be out here, and you shouldn't be putting all this weight on me at this moment in time." And it started to hurt, and I plowed on for another probably 7K, and I just said, "Yeah, no, I'm being silly trying to push through this at the moment." The pain was a bit tough, so I pulled up and went for a walk on Sunday just to try and stretch it out. I'm still just trying to stretch it out. Feels like I've got one of those big painful knots in the soleus on my left calf, and I'm now just back taking it easy for a little bit because I know that I don't want to get into this ebbs and flows of my calf, thinking it's all right, starting running again, going backwards. So I need to be a little bit patient. In fact, I spoke about this on Out and Back, just coming back from calves and being patient and not frustrated. So it's, I feel like I've taken a step or two back, but I also know in my mind I've taken a step or two forward because I'm taking it a little bit easy. So we did some strength work this morning. Sharon and I did a bit of a slow dawdle this afternoon for about 2 and a bit K, just trying to stretch the calf. And so it'll be a pretty easy week ahead for me just to make sure that I can get to Sydney and do my training run. So,
yep. And Lucia, you've got City to Surf coming up, I guess, next weekend.
Yeah. So I've got City to Surf coming up. Not the weekend just gone, but the weekend before. It was the Real Insurance 5 and 10K in Sydney, which for those of you that haven't done it before, it's a really, really flat course, 1 or 2 minor inclines, but it's one of my favourite races to do because if you want to try and crack a PB, that's the race to do it in. But it was freezing. The chill factor was nuts. The headwinds wasn't our friend. I think it helped us for maybe like 50 meters of the whole race. But considering where my training has been, I was very happy with how I came in. I wanted to get in between 72, 75 minutes. Came in at 73 and 48 seconds. So I was very happy, all things considered. And then I ran home, but I stopped off at Macca's, as you do.
Chocolate thick shake?
No, I had one of the Macca's special meals, 2 burgers, fries, and a Coke.
Okay. You deserved it. You deserved
Yep.
it, Lucia.
Replacing calories. And
100%.
how's your training? So how's the training going this weekend? Have you done much training over the weekend?
Not much. I had a wedding on Saturday night, but I stayed out at Manly. For those of you that aren't from Sydney, Manly's just over the water. Beautiful part of Sydney to stay in. So still managed to get up to go for a quick run on the beach on the Sunday morning. Surprisingly, I had no hangover. So I was very, very shocked at that. So yeah, training this week hasn't been where it should be. So City to Surf is going to be interesting because the plan is to run down to the start, do City to Surf, and then run home. And that should get me about 21, 22 Ks all up.
Yeah. I must admit, I'm the same. My training's nowhere near where it should be. I haven't done any real significant training apart from a half marathon a couple of weekends ago with Tara. I haven't done anything since Gold Coast. I'm still struggling with coughs and wheeziness and asthma and stuff since Gold Coast. So just been taking it really easy. Put on a few kilos, which is never good. But we got Sunny Coast Half Marathon this weekend, Tara. So I'll just run it with Tara, take it easy, work through it with Tara. Tara's looking shocked that we've got the half marathon on this weekend.
Sure.
Yep. So I'll run it with Tara and just take it easy. And then I guess we keep building up to Chicago and New York and Niagara Falls as well. So I'm not too worried, but it's easy to put the weight on and to fall into some bad habits when you're not running because you're not feeling well. So just one of those things, I guess.
Cheers. Lucky I kept my running up in New Zealand then. Now that I know that I've got a half marathon next weekend.
Sounds like you were the disciplined one, Tara. So
Yeah. Well, maybe.
That's
maybe.
all right. I can run it with a lung full of mucus and still probably do okay for a time. But
Yeah, and you'll still run backwards for me. So
yeah, you'll be all right. Now the other thing, guys, the Olympics have started. What are your thoughts on week 1 of the Olympics of all sports? We love all our sports, but what are your thoughts? I know we all love it.
Loving it.
Yeah.
Loving the skateboarding and the BMXing. Like, you think people put so much work into something for like 4 years. The amount of skateboarders that stacked it on the same trick they were trying to do. This is going to sound bad, but I was laughing. And then when it was the BMXing, the Aussie who was coming second, I was kind of hoping everyone after her would fail.
Yes.
And so that way the Aussie wouldn't go too far down, and was and then when she realised that she got bronze, it was just spectacular. And she celebrated in style. she had a Macca's burger and a beer.
Yeah,
There you go.
yeah,
That's the one
way.
where the American girl just rode over the jumps and just did
Yeah.
really high jumps. Didn't do any tricks or anything, but just literally went higher than anybody else and got the silver.
Yeah. I love the stories that are coming out. You know, the BMX girl that won gold and the story of her brother. But just going back to the skateboarding, one of the greatest lines ever I've seen on Twitter, or what they call it, X nowadays, is that some guy was obviously watching the skateboarding and there was like no one was landing anything there for a while. And he said, I don't get this skateboarding. Why didn't they just hold it down at the Coles supermarket shopping centre? Because they can at least land the tricks. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's pretty cool. So, but that was pretty funny. But yeah, the Olympics are amazing. Love the stories. Been many a time Sharon and I have been wiping our eyes as someone's gone on to the gold medal. The swimming's been fantastic. And now we're into the athletics, and once again Australia has started promising there. So yeah, it's all cool.
Yep. And I learnt over the weekend that pole vaulting's much more than just pole vaulting with one pole.
I'm not going to go.
You missed that. All right. On that note, it's that time of the week where we talk about the real news, the news of marathon running. So Tony, what's been happening around the world of running over the past few days?
Yeah, and we talked about the Olympics, and quite often we'll talk about one of my most favourite athletes, and that's Safan Hassan. And she did drop. She was doing the 15, 5, and 10K, and then the marathon. She's dropped the 1500. There's hasn't been a lot of reasoning behind it. All we just knew was that she's dropped it. But and we can only sort of speculate around the reasons, but maybe doing the 4 was a lot. I know she came second in her heat in the 5,000 meters, so she'll go through to the finals there, and then she's got the 10,000. I think the 10,000 is like 48 hours before the marathon, so
less than 48 hours. Yeah,
it's a really challenging schedule. And there was an article today around the marathon course itself, and they reckon it's one of the toughest courses that and some of the hills. And like last week, I know we talked about Kipchoge giving himself an excuse around heat and hills, but they say this is a brutal, brutal course. So it will be interesting to see what happens, but I'm sort of tipping a surprise in both. You know, if the course is going to have that much play in it, I think what everyone's hoping for is that Kipchoge will win the gold, because you know he's the GOAT in our eyes and probably deserves it. But the reality is that I'm thinking the course is going to bring everyone back, and it's going to be an even playing field, pardon the pun, or an uneven playing field. But those people that have really trained for the hills, I'm expecting some upsets in the marathon. So 10,000 meters has been won by Joshua Cheptegei, and he's been the fastest runner over the past 12 years, which is something I actually didn't know. And he took 18 seconds off the Olympic record. So that was pretty cool. Race was set up with the 3 Ethiopians dominating the front of the pack. And with about 600 to go, Joshua made his mark and just pushed it up, and he held on to win the race in a time of 26 minutes and 43 seconds.
I'd be happy with a 5K for that.
Yeah, me too. Like I'm looking at that and going, oh my God, you know, I was stoked when I broke 30 at Park Run. So 26:43.
Every lap you do on a 5K lap on a 5K run on a track, they're doing 2 laps to your 1 lap, Tara.
Yeah, unbelievable. And
no, they're actually doing about 2 and a little bit.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And Aragawi from Ethiopia was second in 26:43:44. So, and Grant G Fisher, I think it's Greg or Grant.
Grant. Yep.
was third in, just snippets behind the second place. The top 13 runners all ran below the previous Olympic record. So I think that once again, we are looking at a whole new world of running in total. So, and I can't tell you what shoes they wore. So I'm sorry about that.
But it does show that things like shoes, science, nutrition is all having an impact on running. The training that they're doing now and the loading they're putting on through their training because they can recover quicker because of the shoes they're wearing is all making a huge difference. And to have one runner beat an Olympic record is huge, but to have 13 inside the top, inside the Olympic record, that's just crazy.
Yeah,
maybe they're all having mustard.
Yeah, and we'll get to mustard. I mean, you and your bloody performance hacks that you're going through. But anyway, I saw a meme. I saw a meme today about the 100 meters, and we were just briefly talking about it off air. And the time that Carl Lewis won the 100 meters,
drugged up.
There was. Carl Lewis wasn't drugged, wasn't it? It was Ben Johnson that was drugged.
Carl was later found to be drugged as well.
So anyway, he ran, 9.91 to win his gold medal. And there was one of the runners today that ran the exact same time. And the difference was Carl won. And the person that ran the time was actually last in the final. So even in sprinting, where it's such a much smaller margin between the runners, there is still that evolution continuing to happen. So now, before we get on to mustard, yes, folks, we're talking about mustard, right? But before we do that, I just wanted to share one of our favorite events that we haven't actually talked about that much this time. The Australian Outback Marathon was won this year by a gentleman called Carl Fleming in a time of 3:02 and 59 seconds. So congratulations, Carl. Second was Logan Calder, a New Zealander, who was in 3:11:42. So 9 minutes difference between first and second. So the beauty about the Australian Marathon is that you get a lot of time running by yourself out there in the solitude of the outback, and it's fantastic. But 9 minutes difference, and then there was 13 minutes difference to then the third place runner, who was Pontus Sioblum from, I think it's Algeria. So
there you go.
An international, right? So that was congratulations. The first female was Bo Webb, who ran it in a time of 3:40. So congratulations, Bo. But the interesting point, so if you were a 4-hour marathoner at the Australian Outback Marathon, the first person that tipped over the 4 hours was Emily Eaton, who came 12th overall. So congratulations. But if you're a 5-hour marathon, you actually have a chance of getting in the top 50, right? So Roxanne Henry, once again, a female from Australia, 5 hours and 22 seconds, and she came in 43rd. So if ever you wanted to get in the top 50 of a marathon and you're about a 5-hour marathoner, the Outback is a little bit tougher than just a traditional road marathon, just quietly. So you might want to add maybe 20 to 30 minutes to your best time. But once again, it's an amazing event. Congratulations to all 109 finishers in the marathon. So let's give a shout out to Jenny Sullivan, who came 109th in a time of 7 hours and 23 minutes. Well done, Jen.
Yep. You got to think that the winner at 3 hours and 2 minutes probably didn't stop and take too many photos of Uluru and Katajuda and selfies on top of the big dune at about 11 kilometers into the race.
Yeah, absolutely. They're flying to do that in that time.
Yep.
So the bit that everyone's been waiting for is mustard the new fuel for runners? We know Tim loves his science, and looking for every conceivable hack to make him run even better. But even he was a bit surprised by this one. And, mustard, I think mustard's really good on a sausage sizzle at Bunnings. You put a bit of tomato sauce on and then you put mustard over the top. But there are a number of runners and athletes who have started to turn to mustard for the potential to combat muscle cramps. So this is interesting. The theory suggests that the acetic acid, the vinegar in mustard, stimulates nerve receptors in the mouth, esophagus, and stomach, and it signals the brain to stop cramping. Much like pickle juice. That's the way pickle juice works as well, in case you didn't know. So, and you've actually put that there. Thanks, Tim. So I was just living there and I didn't need to. So mustard's turmeric content, known for its anti-inflammatory properties, might help ease muscle soreness after a run. But what does the study say? Well, a 2022 study found athletes consuming 30 packets of mustard post-exercise.
They're those packets you get in the US. Yep.
Experienced no change in symptoms even 60 minutes after eating it. So you've led us all up and then said, well, the science actually doesn't show anything at all.
Well, the science proves that it doesn't actually work. So it's good. It's something to know. Don't stop taking your mustard. It's doing nothing for you. Trust the science.
And there's not a lot of calories in there when I look at that. So
Could you imagine finishing a marathon and grabbing 30 packs of those little sachets of mustard and starting to guzzle them down?
What I didn't say is, in that article when I read it, that runners are actually putting them into their belts and chewing on them as they're and eating them as they're running, packets of mustard.
Must be just like
your pickle juice, yeah. So it's interesting. But I think to pickle juice, there is some science behind pickle juice.
Yeah.
And there is quite a lot of studies out there, and a lot of professional teams have used pickle juice in the past.
Yeah.
And I think this is the cheaper alternative. Just steal a whole heap of packets from your McDonald's or from your what do you call them in the US, Wendy's, or your Carl's Juniors or whatever they're called in the US. Grab a whole heap of those little packets of mustards on the way to the start line and shove them down your spy belt and off you go.
I'm going to stick with my pickle juice, and I'll leave my mustard to Bunnings on a Saturday morning. So.
Cool. All right, so that's the news this week, Tony, I presume?
That's it.
No worries. All right. So now it's that time to focus on the topic of the week, the things we've learned along the way. So I'm just going to sit back tonight. I'm going to be the host of the show and just ask the questions and get you guys to answer them. So how's that sound?
Sounds like a plan.
Good. All right. So, guys, what was your best race or run? Doesn't have to be a race. Could be a run. What was your best race or run ever, and why? Now, I'm not necessarily talking about your fastest time, but one of those races or runs where everything just worked and clicked into place and it did everything you wanted to. I'll start with you, Lucia.
Well, Tara's not going to be happy when I say the one for me. Boston for me. Boston, okay. Yes, it was my fastest, but everything just fell into place on the day. Like, it couldn't have gone better. Yep. So for me, it was Boston. It was just, it just couldn't have gone. Yeah, I don't know why. I think because I trained so hard for it. It's amazing what happens when you actually put the work into training. I discovered it pays off.
Okay. Tara, what would be your best race or run ever? You're still laughing.
Well, I'm just thinking I normally wing it for marathons, and I'm trying to think which one would be my best marathon that I've actually done, and I'm probably leaning towards maybe probably Queenstown, I reckon. I sort of just did that one nice and just no problems, no stomach problems, just ran it, nice scenery, took my time, didn't get any soreness. It was lovely. I also like London. London sort of fell into plan and everything went really well there for me. So, yeah.
Okay. And Tony?
The best race that I've ever done, and this is something that, because as you know, Sharon and I run together, but I can probably think of two. that I really thought were awesome. First one I'd say was Berlin, and I felt great during Berlin. Now, of course, we didn't finish as well as what we would have liked. Sharon had some issues on that particular day, and but I felt amazing, and it really, I had trained well leading into Berlin, and it was just, everything was just perfect for me. So and so it was me helping Sharon for once, because usually Sharon's helping me. But yeah, Berlin, and then following it up, we both ran Chicago so well. So it was just 2 weeks, 2 marathons, and they were probably the best I've ever felt before, during, and after. So, and yeah, I just think that whole preparation was key to that. I went in confident, I went in feeling good. And even between the races, as we talked about last week, we did a couple more runs than what we maybe normally would have, and a couple of longer runs. You know, when I say longer runs, not like a 25K long run, it was about an 8K run. And I remember Sharon getting really angry with me because she didn't want to do an 8K run. But I think what that led to was Chicago and us both feeling really awesome and just enjoying that race so much.
Yep.
And in all honesty, I think I might actually go back, sorry, Tim, and say Sunny Coast, my very first marathon. Now that I've had some time to think about it, Sunny Coast, the very first marathon. That's what got me hooked into marathon running. So, yeah. Anyway, back to you again, sorry.
So that's all right. I was just going to say, I think my best race or run ever was probably the Sunny Coast Half Marathon a number of years ago. And it was my fastest time ever in the half marathon, 1 hour 35 and a few seconds. And everything just seemed to go well on the day. It just was one of those perfect races, I think, for me. So that's probably my one. Now, Lucia, thinking about your race, the good race in Boston, you sort of alluded to it a little bit, but what happened, do you think, that led to that run being so successful? And what were some of the key things you learned as a result of that run now that you reflect back on it?
Kind of looking back at it now, I had a completely different mindset for Boston because I knew that this would be the only chance I had to do Boston. So I had to put everything into it. And it was the positive thought that I had it in my mind thinking, okay, no, I've got this. Like, some people were doubting my plan. Like, is it going to work? So it was kind of a bit of like, I wanted to prove people wrong, but I had a completely different mindset, even in terms of training. Like, nothing was getting in the way of it because I was going to give it a good crack, and I wasn't going to leave any stone unturned. So I think the one key thing that I took out of it, like, as I said earlier, the work, like, very surprising. If you put the work in, you actually get the results. It's only taken me 2 marathons to learn that, but better late than never. But also how important the mindset is, and to take in all the surroundings. I don't think I've ever enjoyed the on-course support as possibly as much as I have in Boston. So just soaking it all in and just having the positive mindset, which for me in Boston was completely different this time.
Yep, 100%. Tara, what about you for Sunny Coast? What were some of the things that led to that being so successful for you?
I think because now that I've thought about it, it comes down to the fact that I had very little preparation, I think, for that. I'd just run Gold Coast half marathon. I'd done a sub-2 half marathon, and I'm like, right, I'm ready to keep going. I only had, 6-7 weeks of training, if that. We told nobody that we were doing a marathon, and I had no expectations of myself. I just went in and did it. And I found SJ along the way, and she taught me so much about marathon running, and I came in at 4 hours 30. So to me, I had no pain. It was just brilliant. Just enjoyed the whole entire time, and I've still been trying to replicate that one, 18 marathons later, and it's still not happening. So I don't know how to replicate that marathon again, but that's what I want. Yeah.
So when you talk about SJ's been on our show before. I'm just looking her up now, what episode number it is. Episode number 23. So for our listeners who want to hear SJ's story, episode 23. But yeah, it's definitely handy when you meet somebody who can help you and guide you through that. And I know she helped you a lot on that one, Tara.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep. And Tony, what did you learn from your run in Berlin?
Yeah, it's probably what I learned from a previous bad run that I put into place for Berlin is,
Yep.
but I learned, I really enjoyed Berlin race itself. Even though it was a bit frustrating there because, we didn't both enjoy it together. So I get a bit frustrated with that, but of course you're there as a supporting run. One of my favourite bits about Berlin is when we're coming up to the Brandenburg Gate and Haley,
Haley Plyman.
That's it, was
IMP graduate,
shouting out support, and she put out that story on Facebook going, "Go Curly and Shazza," and it was just so amazing, and I still remembered laughing so much as she was doing it, but then to see it go to see it go on social media was a crack up. But yeah, I learned so much from Berlin and Chicago, and especially in between the races, just learning to keep moving. So yeah, you don't run a marathon without some form of pain, so you're always going to have a bit of soreness or stretchiness that you've got to work through. But I think but the big thing I think for Chicago was also we'd been away from home for probably 3 weeks roughly, give or take, and I think we both just looked at each other at the start line in Chicago and just said, let's get this done. And it was just like, it's hard to describe, but I think we were both just wanting to get home, sort of thing, having a good race at Chicago just was the icing on the cake for us. I don't think we thought we would have such a good race, but we did, so we loved it.
Yep. Yeah, and I guess for me, my learning out of my good one at Sunny Coast Half was probably around being the fittest I was ever in my last 10 years. I was supremely fit at that point, done all the hard training, come out of a good Gold Coast campaign 6-8 weeks beforehand, feeling really good, really strong, and I just was able to use that momentum to get into the race. And on the day, everything just clicked. Everything just worked perfectly and felt really good. So conversely, there's good things to learn when you have good races, but there's probably more important things to learn on bad races or runs or things where they don't go to plan. I won't call them bad, but when they don't go to plan. Again, so Lucia, what would be probably your worst run or race ever and why? And again, it doesn't have to be a slow one. It's just one where everything sort of fell off.
Probably, ironically, my first marathon, which was Paris. So I probably underestimated how tough a marathon is. I may not have put in all the training. I could feel a blister from about the 10K mark onwards. And I didn't train for cobblestone, and that was a good chunk of the course. And I'll never forget, it was at about the 31K mark, and they always talk about the wall. And there was a set of stairs to my right, and I'm like, if I take those stairs, I can be back in my hotel room in 15 minutes. So I literally stood there for a moment. I'm like, if I do it, I have to make the call now. But then I'm like, no, I've come all this way. I want the T-shirt and the medal that says marathon finisher. And plus, I didn't want to waste the money, which ultimately is what it came down to. But it was so I have come close in quitting a few times when it's been international races, but I'm like, no, I've paid the money. I need to finish it type thing.
Yep. Tara, what about you?
I think we all know the answer to that. Lucia's favourite was my worst. Look, Boston, just everything that could go wrong went wrong on that day. And I had prepped 100% for that. I had done all the hill training. I had done everything. I was so fit. I was so healthy, and I was so ready for it. And everything was going to plan to about 12Ks and nutrition, heat, late start. It just, the wheels literally fell off and I was sliding along on the chassis without, and there was sparks flying off the back end of me. It was terrible. It was terrible. Did I want to quit? Yes, I did. Would have I quit? No, because A, Tim wouldn't let me, and B, my mental, I just couldn't quit. I had spent too much money to get there. So, yeah. That was probably my slowest marathon at 6 hours and 5, I think it was, Tim.
Yep.
Maybe. Yeah. I don't know. But it's not about the time that it was. It was just, it was just awful. So, yeah. Tony?
Funnily enough, I think I've talked about my Boston experience far too much, so I'm going to spare everyone from that this time. So, and I don't want to gang up on Boston because, and I've tricked you all because I've worn my Boston shirt, and my Boston cap, and you thought I was going to be. My worst race that I want to talk about was the Sunshine Coast Half in 2019. So, and the reason why it was my worst is because Sharon and I had run the Gold Coast Half 6 weeks or whatever it was before, and 10 meters, probably, at Gold Coast where you come onto the blue carpet just at the finish there. I've come onto the blue carpet feeling good and I tore my calf, right? So I've got these amazing finish photos of me feeling like the snipers got me. So there's one photo of me in great pose, feeling really good, and the next minute it's so it's for those people who don't watch on video, you need to watch because I just pulled the world's best face. But so I tore my calf and it was like 10 meters from the finish line. I was so annoyed with myself. Not that it gave me no indication it was going to go. It just decided enough was enough, right? So for those who haven't sort of picked up on this, I have some issues with my calves. But then 6 weeks later, I ran the Sunshine Coast, and I knew I wasn't quite right. And my calf was okay. Calves are dodgy things because they give you this sense that everything's going to be okay, and they're not. So I tore it. Yeah, I tore it again at the 7K mark. So, and anyone who knows the Sunshine Coast, you go run from Alex Headland into Mooloolaba and then you come back. And so at that 7K mark, you're coming back past the start. So I had the choice. So my calves hurting, I'm slowing down, and I think to myself, I really should stop. I know, I didn't. I kept going. And then at the 14K mark, which is you're out deep on the river, the calf goes again. So I'm trying to just shuffle. And Sharon was trying to help and support. And I just said, look, you just go. I'll get to the finish line somehow. You just go. So she just left. So I officially came second last that year. And my only focus was on, because the 3-hour cutoff time for the half marathon, I came in at 3 hours and 1 minute. Still officially recorded, but officially second last. So it was horrible, just trying to shuffle, run, walk to get to the end. So it was just horrible.
Yep. I can understand that. I don't think I've ever had a race where I've been in that position that you guys are describing. Maybe it's just I'm more positive, or I look at things differently, maybe, because I always go in with an A, B, and a C sort of a plan. So if things do get bad, I just go, well, stuff it. I'll just work my way to the finish line and find an end. I think for me, probably the worst race or the worst experience I had was, again, a calf injury that I had in Auckland half marathon a number of years ago, 2015 or so. And about 2Ks in, my calf went, and it was just through a hilly section, and I still had 19Ks to go. And at that stage, I think Auckland was our second half marathon, Tara, I think, at that time. So, yeah, but again, it was just like, okay, well, I'm just going to ease it back now. I'll just cruise through this. I'd go again a little bit later, and then I'd sort of walk a bit, run a bit. But I've never had that place where I've felt like, oh, this is the worst thing ever. I've always seen there's opportunities from everything that I do, every race. So so they're the sort of things that I don't really, if you asked me for my worst ever performance or anything like that, I couldn't probably tell you, because I don't tend to look at them that way. I tend to look at them as, oh, I got that done. There's some learnings there to take into the next one. But Lucia, when
That
we talk
Sunshine
about,
Coast, just before we go on, that Sunshine Coast half marathon that I talk about was the only time I've ever cried crossing the finish line, because I was that relieved that I could stop, stop. And the other funny thing is that our good friend Terry Frew was waiting. He'd seen Sharon come and couldn't see me, so he was waiting for me. And then finally the last runners are coming through, and somehow he missed me. I'm running by myself, Terry. I was second last runner. How could you miss me? But he missed me, and he caught up with us afterwards, and he said, "When did you come through?" And I said, "Oh." So, but anyway, that was the only bit of humor that I could see in that run.
Yeah. No, never got to that point where I break down either. So I don't understand it, but I'm just built different, I guess. So let's hear improvement opportunities. So what did you learn as an improvement opportunity from your poor performance in Paris?
That you should put the work into training, because that helps. And nothing new race day, because another thing that I had done, which I'd never done before, was on the morning I had peanut butter on toast for breakfast. Never done it in any of the training runs. And I had a stitch for a good 10 Ks of Paris. So yeah, it was a big learning of what not to do, and not to be so harsh on yourself if things don't go wrong. You're not going out there to win, just going out there because I'm fortunate enough and I can do it, and always thinking not everyone can do it. So always grateful for when I can cross that finish line. Yeah, so definitely nothing new on race day was definitely a big one that day.
Yep, 100% agree. Yep. What about you, Tara? What did you learn from Boston?
Nothing new on race day.
Current NZ.
Get onto Current NZ. Flying RuNR 20 if you want a 20% discount. Seriously though, no. Current NZ has made a huge difference to my running, and I have a lot more confidence in coming up to Chicago and Niagara Falls and New York for it. Running in New Zealand, there isn't a lot of public toilets I've found along any of the public areas that I was running. So I had no concerns. Like, I went for a run like a normal person and came back, and I'm like, oh, this is how normal people run. It felt really good. So Boston, I wish I had known about Current NZ then. It may have made a difference, but I definitely will not be touching Gatorade Endurance at the Chicago Marathon. I will be just drinking water. So, yeah, nothing new on race day.
Yeah. And Tony?
Yeah, I think for me, what the Sunshine Coast taught me was that I really needed to get serious and give my body time to recover from things when they go wrong. And so after Sunshine Coast, our next race after that was the Melbourne Marathon, which is October. So we really only had 8 weeks, but I just stayed off my calf for probably the first 2 to 3 weeks, and then just slowly brought that back. I went to see my physio. I got all sorts of exercises to do, started to understand that, sometimes your calf is taking up to 7 times your body weight when you're landing. So I really started to understand the importance, as well as the importance of, maximizing your glutes and what have you. So I really learnt a lot about just getting some balance in my leg muscles. And it's probably fair to say, probably for the last 2 years up until Gold Coast, I really hadn't had any calf problems because of what I was doing. And so that was the big learning for me, just really spend some time investing in getting my calf, my glutes, my quads, all of that stuff balanced. So instead of getting 6 times the body weight because nothing else is working, I mean, even in the best, I think it's 1.7 times your body weight, even if everything's working well. So that's double me. So even best case scenario, my calves had to be ready to do that. So I guess my learning was I never wanted to feel that again, that pain that I felt and that tears at the finish line. And I certainly, and Siri's now feeling sorry for me. So, but yeah, it was just, that was it for me. I just needed to get really serious. And I was just going to be on a roller coaster of calf injuries all the time, which I didn't want to be.
Yeah, and I guess as I was sort of alluding to before, I get analytical. I look at all sort of aspects of runs in hindsight afterwards. Usually, the night after the race, I'm lying in bed recapping the race. I'm thinking through it. What could I do better? And there's always a learning. There's always something when you think back on it that you can do better. So now, speaking of all that stuff on your mind and mental aspects to it all, I know when things go bad that they can play on your mind for quite a bit afterwards. I know, Tara, you took a little while after Boston to get your body and your mindset right to be able to run again with confidence. Are there any tips or tricks that you guys can share that with our listeners to help overcome some of that mental barrier when you do have a poor performance? I'll start again with you, Lucia.
I think for me, just taking the lessons away, because I vowed after Paris I'd never do another marathon again. I'm like, nah, that's it. I'm done. Not doing it. But then 6 months later, I'll sign up for New York. It's just, you can't control everything, but as long as you can take something away from the bad ones, because that's where you tend to learn the most. So it's just, I think for me, it's just remembering you can't control everything, and you're going to have your bad ones, and don't be too hard on yourself, because sometimes it is just out of your hands. Like sometimes I wish I could take my own advice, because I can give it out, but I just don't take it sometimes. So I think for me it was just taking something positive away from a bad race.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. Like, look, Boston was definitely my worst race. I've run many marathons. Not all of them have been good. Some of them have been pretty average, actually. But Boston is the first one that actually threw my whole entire confidence on running. I've always gone into running and any sort of running with the attitude of, well, I don't give up, so I'll just keep going. I think because Boston was so close, it was 4 seconds. I think that's what threw my confidence. And it did take a long time for that mental confidence to come back again in my body. And I guess, yeah, you are right, Lucia. It's just a case of learning from that mistake. And I've learned a lot from Boston. And yeah, I think it made me stronger mentally as well as a person, to know that if I can get through that, I can get through anything.
Yep. And Tony?
I think for me, from a mental perspective, is that I just see it in many cases of you've always got options. So the option is you drop out or you pull yourself to the side. And if ever I was in a position where it was that bad, I pulled out of the Australian Outback Marathon. First time we ran it, ended up only running the 28K, so getting the glorified ultra half. So, but still listed with all the halves. So I think I came second last in that one as well. So, but I think the option I always tend to go for is that I'm going to get through it. And that's in my mind. And I know that it's not going to last forever. So, and I just think about where I am and what I'm doing and, trying to break it down into bite-sized chunks and just really working through it. And, what ultimately got me through that Sunshine Coast one was I was 14K out and I thought, well, how the hell am I going to get back? So you've got to get back somehow. So I may as well keep going. I couldn't see. It's not like you get this thing at the beginning of the marathon and says, look, if you're having a problem, this car's going to come by. I had no idea how I was going to get back. So I just kept going. But I'm really proud of getting through the challenging events that I've had. And even with the Outback Marathon, I was really proud to do 28K. And fair enough, Sharon's now holds it over me that she's completed one more marathon than me, but I'll get her one day. You watch. But to me, I've always been proud of the fact that I've been able to get through it. So whether it was the Boston one in 2023 or whether it was, Sunshine Coast in 2019, I'm just proud of the fact that I've got through them, and I look back on them with enormous pride, but I also look back on them because things have got better from both of those races. So, and it's now just about, I've got another little setback with the calf, but I know that's not going to be around for forever. It's not going to be a long-term thing again. I just need to be patient while I'm rehabbing. If I'm not patient, it will be a constant, and I don't want that. So I know that, so it's what you learn, and it's that sense of pride and just focusing in on the now. Okay, one more kilometre, one more step. And one of the girls that passed me towards the end of Sunshine Coast, I swear to this day, I went to primary school with her, and and that just seeing that face and trying to think of the name probably got me through 3 kilometres, right? Just who is she? Well, I know her from somewhere, and so sometimes it's just those little things that keep you going. So that's what I do.
Yep. All right, I'm going to wrap this up and ask the last 3 questions as one sort of question here. So, on those good runs where you've learnt something and taken away a good key learning, have you guys tried to replicate it back into your training or into your next race? And have you gone back the following year and then had success at that same race again using the things you've learned? Again, Lucia.
Probably in my case, not one that didn't go so well, but it was Canberra half in 2018. And in 2018, I had a massive year of running. I was going to do Canberra, I was doing Berlin, then I was doing, like a week after Berlin, I was doing runs at Disneyland Paris, and then Dopey a few months later. So it was about early in camp, because I'd done the 10K the day before, no problem. And then it was early in the half, about 2Ks, as we were getting to New Parliament House, my calf, I could feel it. I'm like, no, this isn't good. So I thought, I'm pulling the pin. First time I had a DNF, but I'm like, I knew it was the right thing to do. And so I'm like, okay, I have to have revenge on that course, because I didn't want it to defeat me. So then I went back in 2019. I didn't care about time. It was just getting it done. So yes, I got Canberra done in 2019 because I don't like to let things defeat me, even though Canberra has to be up as one of my most boringest courses I've ever done. But I had
That's
to go
Canberra.
back. Yeah, not my favorite course whatsoever. Yeah, so it was just a mindset of not letting things defeat me.
Yep. Tara?
I think my one would have been the first Gold Coast double that I did. So I ran the first half with Lucia, and I'd run it so well that day that I thought it's going to be a breeze for the next day. I ended up, unfortunately, I think maybe my stomach issues again. And Lucia was watching me, and I was getting slower and slower. And I think I came in at like 5 hours 40 something for the full marathon. And the following year, I'm like, I can do better than this. And I just learned, all right, multi-day events, you need to do something a bit different here. And I just pace myself differently. And learning from previous experience is what us as humans have got to do. Otherwise, we're going to keep repeating the same mistakes, aren't we? But I think, that one was for me, because I ended up doing a 5-hour marathon for my second double on the Gold Coast. Yeah.
And Tony?
Funnily enough, we have never gone back to do the Sunshine Coast after that year, which is interesting. So, because I'm thinking, have I never? And yeah, the last result for curl in Sunshine Coast half is that 3:03 that I ran in 2019. So, and yeah, I won't even look at the position. So, but and of course I haven't gone back to do Boston, although I really do want to do Boston, but I understand that's going to be even more challenging from now on because I don't want it to beat me. And it may be a case that I just run the marathon course on footpaths or something. So because I don't know if I'll ever get a chance to run the race again. But yeah, I think the learnings I took from both of those has put me in much better stead and has enabled me to, understand myself. And the key for me, and I've talked about this before, is that I want to be standing on that starting line really confident and comfortable with where I am and what I've got ahead of me. And so far, I've been able to do that since both, more particularly since Boston. So, and then whatever happens on the course, and then the mindset's going to get you through that. So, but yeah, I think the learnings, I've definitely taken the learnings out of both of those. I just haven't gone back, which means that I now have to tell myself to go and do Sunshine Coast next year because. And while I'm thinking about it, good luck to all the people running Sunshine Coast this weekend because it's an amazing marathon and I will be back one day.
Yeah, we got Kai Luck running it this weekend, the marathon up there. And Tara and I, obviously. You can always take Tara's position or my position if you want, Tony. I'm sure Tara and myself would be quite happy to hand it over.
No,
that's my training run. I'm getting bling for my training run. No, sorry, Tony, you can't have my spot. You can have Tim's.
No, I can't run it this weekend anyway with my calf. So yeah.
All righty. Well, thanks for that, guys. That wraps up the questions for tonight. So, Tara, what's next on the thing?
All right, let me get to that spot. Oh, here we go. All right, we're going for a tip for you.
Oh, there you go. It must be my turn to provide a tip. Thanks for that, Tara. I guess this week my tip is about learning that when it comes to running, no race, no run is ever really 100% perfect, and it's very rare to then back it up and repeat it again. But there are always learning opportunities. There's always room for improvement. There's always things you can take out of a run. And I guess this is important to remember because sometimes it can be quite mentally draining, particularly if you have a couple of poor runs or runs that don't go to plan in a row. And as you can hear from Tara earlier on, it did play with her for a little bit as well. So my tips this week are to focus more on enjoying the run for what it is, knowing that nothing is ever really going to be ever 100%. Even people like Eliud Kipchoge, even if he wins the marathon for the third time in the Olympics this weekend coming up, he'll still say it's not 100% perfect. There's things he could have done better. There's always something to learn on the run. And it's the same with any of the runs we do. There's always something, whether it's a training run, a race, a park run, whatever it is, there's always something that you can learn from it and take on board to improve. Even if it's 0.01% better, you can still do that. And it's always important to remember that bad things happen. You can't always control them. Stomach issues will happen, weather becomes a problem, etc., etc. So it's not the end. And if you let that get to you and eat you up, it will be the end of your running that you'll do. So yeah, that's my tips this week. Get out and enjoy it a little bit more, and just realize there's always an opportunity to learn some more. So that's that. So this episode's about to end, but before we do that, Lucia, what is on next week?
Thanks, Tim. So next week, I'm really looking forward to next week's episode. So I'll be giving a recap of the run is Christmas Day, also known as the City to Surf, which falls this weekend. So I can't wait for that one. But we're also going to talk about runs which are on our bucket list and why they're on our bucket list and why we want to run them, the places we want to go visit. So just giving some insights into what we're planning over the coming year. So yeah, it's going to be a fun one. So yeah, so Tim, as you know, life's short, and I'm pretty sure we've all got some deep bucket lists to empty before we go. So yeah, it should be another fun episode next week, guys.
Yeah, should be a fun one. It's a dreamers episode next week because there's so many marathons around the world, and it'll be quite interesting to hear everyone's thoughts on which of the bucket list marathons out there. I have a few in my mind that I don't think I'll ever be able to get to because they're just so expensive, but I'd love to get there one day. Yeah. So thanks again, Lucia, for joining us as with Tara and Tony. Thank you again. That wraps up our episode tonight. Once again, we'd like to say thank you to all of our listeners for joining in and listening to us just babble on. If you like this episode or just the podcast itself, we'd be really appreciative if you could please leave some comments, like the episode, or maybe even just share some of the learnings that you've learned through our social media on Instagram and Facebook. As usual, video of this episode will be available at Spotify and YouTube, and audio will be available on Apple and Amazon and most other popular podcast platforms. Remember, every step forward is a victory. Lace up, hit the road, and we'll see you all on the next episode of the Flying Runner. Until then, happy running.
Happy running.